Welcome to the Escape into Board Games podcast.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Matt.
And this is our escape from the real world where we talk about board games. In this episode, we talk about board games named after places.
So please join us for the Escape into Board Games podcast. Oh, the places you'll go. There is fun to be done. There are points to be scored. There are games to be won. And the magical thing you can do with that ball will make you the winningest winner of all.
In Dr. Seuss's beloved book, Oh, the Places You'll Go, readers are whisked away on an enchanting odyssey traversing a whimsical landscape of vibrant imagination and boundless potential. It's a tale that celebrates the adventure of life and the uncharted territories of the human spirit.
Similarly, within the realm of tabletop gaming, we discover a fascinating parallel as we escape into board games.
Board games, like Seuss's tale, invite us to embark on unique journeys, not through physical locales, but through the intricate and richly nuanced landscapes of our minds and hearts.
Board games are more than just cardboard and pieces. They are portals that transport players to diverse emotional and intellectual realms, offering profound experiences akin to the exhilarating highs and perplexing lows encountered on the pages of Seuss's masterpiece.
Just as Seuss's book reminds us of life's adventures, we will take a look at how these games beckon us to explore, learn, and grow through the simple roll of some dice or the placement of some tokens.
So fasten your seatbelts, dear listener, and prepare to embark on a ludic voyage where imagination knows no bounds, in an episode we like to call, Oh, the Places You'll Go. So, Chris, do you play a lot of first-person shooters?
I don't anymore. I used to play quite a bit.
Yeah, me too.
But not anymore.
When in my 20s and 30s, we just played the heck out of those.
Yeah, lots of multiplayer.
Recently, they released one of my favorites, and they spruced it up and gave it a new coat of paint. And so I loaded it up and went back to play it for the first time in like a really long time. And then I found myself like walking through these virtual environments, through the hallways and stuff, and going, oh yeah, I remember this.
Yeah.
I remember this. I can go around, oh, what's over here? And then everything came like flooding back like it was a real place that I was visiting, right?
Yeah.
And the sights and sounds were all there, and it took you back. And of course, that's a virtual environment, and you can easily get sucked in with that illusion in a first-person shooter.
Yeah.
But I've also felt a similar sort of tug when I come back to board games that I haven't played in a long time. And you get it out and you see the artwork and you're looking at the cards and you're touching the components and you're like, oh yeah, I remember this.
Right.
But then you start to play it, and that's when the systems come in and you're doing the thinking that you did 5-6 years ago, the last time you got it out, and you remember that brain burn, that particular puzzle that poked you when you sat down in front of this game the last time.
Yeah.
And that comes back. It's like a feeling, like a place.
Yeah, like you don't remember like the specifics of, oh, if I do this strategy necessarily.
Yeah.
That's really not what you're talking about. It's more the feeling of what the game evokes in terms of theme, in terms of, how it feels.
Exactly.
And the experience that it provides. Yeah.
It's almost as if some games smell different than other games.
Yeah.
Like you open it up and you're like, oh, yeah, I remember this, right?
Yeah. I definitely get that feeling from art, actually. Like I'll just see, somebody's face on one of the cards or on one of the tiles or something, and you just feel like you're right back there. You know, it's like, oh, it's a weird mix because if you love the game and you experience this, you're in the game. Like you come back and you're in the game again. Yeah. But you also are kind of, you got another foot in the past and you're kind of remembering, the first time you played it, maybe the first 3 or 4 times you played it, who you played it with, where you were, like the location, and those smells and sounds kind of come back too.
That's true.
It really does bring up these huge memories, emotions.
One of my games from my collection that is closely linked to a place for me is Two Rooms and a Boom,
Oh.
which you can hear me talk about in our unique game experiences episode. But in order for that game to really work, you need a lot of people. And so I brought it up to Family Camp, which is this magical place where families will just want to join in these kinds of activities. And we played the heck out of that game, and it went off really, really well. And so now whenever I have it out, and whenever I bring it out, it always takes me back to that experience, to the perfect experience. And we always trying to recreate that magic. But yeah, it smells like camp and it feels like camp. And you can swear there's like sand in the box, but of course there isn't, right? It just has those memories, so it takes me there.
So there's a place where family will play board games with you whenever you want?
Telling you, man, it is magical.
One of the first games I was introduced to was The Downfall of Pompeii.
Okay.
We played that quite a bit.
That's the one where it has the plastic volcano on the board, and you have to take the little people and throw them in.
Yeah.
The volcano.
Yeah, it's Mount Vesuvius is exploding, and everyone's running to get out of the city. And as things go on, you're dropping people into the volcano because they've been selected as victims. But there's some dispute. It's one of the first games that we played, is one of the first games, modern board games that we bought. And we played it a ton. And I just remember just sort of playing it and imagining, because it's kind of a gruesome, the board game itself isn't particularly gruesome, but the theme is really gruesome.
Yeah, it is.
And I remember thinking, like the smells and the fears of all those people. And some of them, you can go to Pompeii and see, their last moments as they're, encrusted in the volcanic ash. And just thinking of that while I was playing, it was really an interesting experience. And I still get that feeling and that sort of all combined together into when I play this game.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And I love the game a lot. And, it's a gruesome theme, but it's an excellent game. And that might be why I like it, actually. And now that I think about it, is because theme is really important for me to, really get immersed and feel like I'm part of the game.
Sure.
And that the consequences matter, right?
Yeah.
There's a real life behind, these little wooden and cardboard things that I'm moving around on a board. And because all of that is mixed into the gameplay, it certainly adds a lot to how it plays.
Yeah. The first game I want to talk about is a game that my youngest and I would play up at Board Game Bliss when they had a demo library and Make New Friends Day. We would go up there, and she just loved to get this game out because it was a very simple strategy game. The rule set is just a little bit more complicated than tic-tac-toe, but the pieces and the board and everything were just beautiful. And whenever I get it out, people know the name of the game before they've even read the box cover. Santorini. Santorini is a three-dimensional grid movement, variable player powers, abstract strategy game for 2 players ages 8 and up that plays in about 20 minutes. Santorini was designed by Gordon Hamilton and published by Spin Master in 2016. If Santorini the board game was a place, it would be a captivating fusion of strategic depth and artistic charm, where players become architects of their own destiny while basking in the Mediterranean splendor of this tabletop paradise. Immerse yourself in the world of Santorini, where sun, sea, and strategy combine to create an unforgettable experience.
I want to say you totally hear the seagulls while you're playing this game, right? Because it looks like those photographs of Greece.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
The components of Santorini are this board, and the board kind of sits up off the table a little bit on this little stand.
Yeah.
Which is pointless. It's way overproduced, right?
Yeah.
But now it looks like an island, and it's just a simple grid, like a checkerboard. But then you place these building pieces. There's 3 different types of white building pieces that you stack on top of. There's all these bases, and then these middle pieces. Then the 3rd floor pieces can go on top. And then finally, the classic blue domes that when you see those blue domes, you think, oh, Santorini.
Yeah. And you instantly picture those photographs, because I've never been.
Exactly.
Of the shores of Greece with what seems like hundreds of white, just pure bright white buildings.
Yeah.
And the blue water and the sky and the blue domes on top of it. And just little highlights on it. The game is beautiful. And you're instantly taken into one of those photographs when you look at the game being set up or getting ready to play it. It's like, oh, this is going to be fun.
Yeah.
You feel transported because of the components.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, what you're doing is you have 2 player pawns that represent your builders, and you move them, and then you build. Mm-hmm. This is interesting because in most games, you can only do this movement orthogonally. But in Santorini, you can move diagonally.
Right.
And you can build diagonally. And you can go up. You can go up a step. So once you've built a building, on a subsequent turn, you can step onto that building. And that's how you climb. And the winner is the player who is standing on a 3-story tall building, which isn't really easy to do because you have to build sort of a ladder structure in order to get your builder to that spot.
Yeah.
And there's all these different strategies to block your opponents from building.
Yeah.
And so it becomes this sort of tic-tac-toe strategy kind of game.
Yeah. I always kind of associate it with sort of like a modern chess, but it's not that complicated, actually.
Yeah.
It's not nearly as complicated as a game of chess.
Yeah.
And it is much more similar to a 3D version of tic-tac-toe.
It's way more accessible than chess because the movement and the rules are very easy. There isn't special rules for each of the different pieces or anything like that. But yeah, it's way more strategic than a typical game of tic-tac-toe.
It's completely beautiful. I mean, you can't talk enough about how this game draws people into it.
Yeah.
And what it looks like when it's all put together. It's incredibly beautiful. The buildings themselves are, have a lot of little details, a lot of windows and doors, and alcoves,
little
and
stairs
like
that go up and stuff. Yeah.
Like it's great.
Before the game begins, each player is given a special card that grants them a special power. Right? So, yes, everybody's moving and building, and we're trying to accomplish that stand on the 3rd floor thing. But there are cards out there that allow us either a different building power or different movement power or different victory conditions.
Right.
And each of these cards is themed after a different Greek god, and there'll be a picture of that god, and he's the one that's been, blessed upon you, and then that's how you go through the game. It's it's abstract strategy, but there's certainly a lot of art and a lot of beautiful components for an abstract strategy game.
Yeah.
Santorini is one of these games that has the entire rule set written on the back of the box.
Does it really?
Move one of your workers. You can move up to 1 level, then build, and then win if your worker reaches the 3rd level. It's really that simple. Like they've distilled it to this 30-second teach. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You can play it with 3 or 4 players, but I find that the game really breaks down quite quickly when you try to play it like that.
Mm.
And it works way better at 2 players, and I would recommend you just stick to 2, personally.
Right.
You can try it for fun at 3 or 4 players, but they have it on the box, to sell units. It's not an accurate representation. It's not the same game.
Now, if I remember correctly, the first time we played it, we played like the base game just to learn what we were doing.
That's right, yeah.
And then there's what they call the advanced rules, and it's really not necessary to play the base game because it is quite simple to catch.
Yeah, it is an interesting puzzle for sure.
Yeah, but I think it's called like the advanced game.
Using the god's powers.
The god's powers, yes.
Use the god's powers or not use the god's powers, yeah.
And that's where the game really shines, in my opinion. That's where it takes a step up from just this Vulcan 3D tic-tac-toe game to this really, interesting modern strategic board game.
And there are different levels of god powers. So there's the simple god powers like Apollo and Artemis and Athena.
Right.
And then there's the advanced god powers like Aphrodite and Ares. So some of the powers would be your worker can move an opponent's worker and force their worker into a space you've just vacated, right?
Right.
So it's like, little simple movement thing. Or like a win condition, Kronos can win the game if there are at least 5 completed towers on the board.
Cool.
So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Kind of puts a timer to the game because I guess the game can kind of go on a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really short game, sort of 10, 15 minutes, I think, is what you're looking at.
Yeah.
I found that when we played it, we want to play it 2 or 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
And it was sort of the best out of 3 kind of thing.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's what we would consider a game of Santorini.
Yeah.
Absolutely a beautiful game. The only thing they're missing is that blue, blue water. The next game we're going to talk about really isn't that beautiful. It's a black or mostly black box. It's, very dark. A lot of the cards and tiles are black or almost black.
Yeah.
And it's a game about murder. Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. Deception, Murder in Hong Kong is a hidden roll, deduction, bluffing, murder mystery game for 4 to 12 players ages 10 and up that plays in about 30 minutes. Deception, Murder in Hong Kong was designed by Toby Ho and published by Jolly Thinkers in 2014. Welcome to the mysterious and captivating cityscape of Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, a place where crime meets deduction in the most thrilling way imaginable. This is a shadowy world where players become investigators, unraveling intricate mysteries set against the backdrop of one of the world's most vibrant cities. Gathered around a table, you and your fellow investigators will delve deep into a web of clues, seeking to expose the murderer among you. Players adopt the roles of investigators, forensic experts, and scientists, each armed with unique abilities to crack the case. The victim's lifeless body lies at the center of your attention as you sift through a tableau of evidence trying to decipher the cryptic messages left behind. Yet, there's a twist. One of you is the murderer, blending seamlessly among the investigators, working to mislead and deceive. As time ticks away, you must rely on keen observation, deduction, and cunning to reveal the truth. Whether you're the investigator piecing together the puzzle or the cunning murderer concealing your tracks, the tension and excitement of this place will keep you on the edge of your seat until the truth is unveiled. So this is a traitor game where, somebody's working against the group, against the team. Mm-hmm. And, there's lots of examples of those. I feel like this is one of the best and probably my first or second favorite of these games. First of all, it plays an enormous amount. Like, if you have 10 people at the party, it's a good game for that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
At the beginning of the game, everyone is dealt 8 cards, 4 from the clue deck, and it's 4 different clues of what was left behind as potentially involved in the murder. Okay. Like a cigarette butt or a needle.
Sure, just like random evidence pieces.
Yeah, and then 4 of them are the means, so like an axe or a gun or something like that.
Right.
And everyone can see everyone's cards in front of them, and everyone is dealt a different role. Well, one player is dealt the forensic scientist, and that person's job is to give clues to everyone else. One person is dealt the card that says murderer on it.
Okay.
And everyone else is an investigator for the most part. So it's one of those games where the forensic scientist tells everyone, close your eyes, and then he says to the murderer, open your eyes and point to one of the cards in front of you that is the clue card that you've left behind, and one of the cards that is the means card of how you committed the crime. So the murderer opens their eyes, they point to 2 different cards in front of them,
okay.
And then the forensic scientist tells everyone, open your eyes, and that's when the game really begins. So for the investigators to win, they have to not just pick out who's the murderer, they have to pick out what means card the murder was committed with and what clue card was key in solving the case.
Right.
The forensic scientist knows who the murderer is and it knows what the 2 cards that they're trying to communicate. And they have these cardboard cards that come out. They're information about the case. They're information or evidence that's been gathered about the case. And it gives the forensic scientist some information to pass on. So it might be things like the victim's identity. It's a young adult, or is it a senior, a male, a female, that kind of thing.
Okay.
The time of death. Is it the morning? Is it noon or afternoon? The social relationship between the murderer. Were they lovers? Were they strangers?
Okay.
And you have these tokens, which are little bullets, these little plastic bullet pieces.
Okay.
And you have 6 of them, and you're going to place the bullets one bullet on each of these cardboard cards, giving clues to the investigators. And you're kind of making this part up. So you know that, the body is an employee and it was in an office building and the murder happened in the night. And hopefully that provides some information to the investigators who then talk about the clues that the forensic scientist has left. And they are trying to determine, well, it says that the body was an employee of the company. So Matt has glue in front of him. Well, glue would be something that's in an office.
Okay.
And someone else will say, but he didn't choose school. He chose an employee, so it's not at a school.
Oh.
So maybe glue isn't a good clue for office. That would be a good clue for like a school though, right?
Right.
So maybe that doesn't mean it's Matt. Maybe the office refers to Sherry's cards, who she has in front of her, because one of her weapons is scissors. So maybe it's like scissors that the victim was killed with.
Cool.
And investigators will talk amongst themselves and they kind of make these wild accusations. Because essentially what the forensic scientist is doing is making the story up as he goes.
Trying to apply the evidence that they've been given.
Exactly.
With the clues at the table.
That already existed before they sat down, right?
Right.
So, if someone has a card that says gasoline, there would be a clue for fire. So you could say fire, or the person died because of a power failure or some sort of conflict or that kind of thing. So if you chose fire, that would lean towards the person with the gasoline.
Right.
That would be a great clue. Now, when I've been a forensic scientist, I've not fared quite so luckily. It's very, very obscure. I think you get 5 or 6 of these tiles that come out that you put these clues on.
Right.
And at some point, somebody can be, okay, I know Matt did it because he had the scissors in front of him and, it was done by an employer. And so you make this accusation, you hand in your badge, which is this little token.
Yeah.
And you're only allowed this one guess, basically, for the whole game. But the games are short.
I bet my badge on this.
Right. So you say, I think it's Matt. He committed the murder with the scissors and the glue or something like that.
Okay.
That was left at the scene. And if you're correct, you've won and we get set up for another game with someone else.
So the investigators have to point to the player, but also the 2 clues that they pointed to in the setup.
Exactly. It's not enough to pick just the person. Like I've got to say, yes, that is 100% correct, or no, that is not 100% correct. So it could still be you, but they've got some of the cards wrong, or it could be someone else entirely.
Wow.
And we do another round. So I toss out one of my cardboard tokens. The one that said the weather might be not very useful, right? Because, does it really matter if it was sunny or dry or humid or cold at the crime scene when you've been stabbed with a pair of scissors in an office building, right? It doesn't really matter. So I'll toss that one out and I'll draw another one at random to replace it. And I'll put the bullet on the clue that best matches that.
Okay.
So it might be traces that are left at the scene, a fingerprint, a footprint, bruises, a blood stain, bodily fluid, or a scar. And hopefully one of those will provide more information that points to the actual murder.
Yeah.
The games are really quick. I think 20 minutes, 30 minutes is relatively accurate. It can go a lot longer if people are really talky.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I think this and I think that. And you have like 2 or 3 people in the group who are like disagreeing and clashing. And it's like, no, I think the scissors refers to this. And well, scissors, they could have scissors in a fire station. It's like, yes, they could. But would a forensic scientist actually point that out? Wouldn't it make more sense to do it as a school?
Yeah. I remember playing this game and being the forensic investigator and looking at the 8 cards in front of the murderer.
Yep.
And trying to come up with like a theme that all the cards, it's like maybe there's an odd number of sporting equipment that player has in front of them, or maybe there's like an odd number, right? There's like, there's just a little bit too many pointy things over there than there is. I always sort of concoct a story in my mind that includes a lot of the things in front of that player, but then point them specifically to the weapons and the clues that they were pointing at, just so that we can get us in the right ballpark, right? Trying to steer us away from player A and B and C and make sure we focus on player D. Because as you were saying, there's so many cards in front of each player. Yeah. There's so many options and very little information that you can give. And so I always found I would concoct like a story that would involve I'd look at that and go, oh, there's like a stapler and scissors and a pencil.
Yeah.
Well, they're in an office, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though the killer pointed to the
letter opener.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting how you do. The forensic investigator has to come up with that story, that narrative that ties it all together, and it's just on the table. You make it up.
Yeah. And then usually the game, involves at the end some sort of explanation. Like, why did you say it was the letter opener? Well, I was trying to get you guys to think about, things that might happen in an office.
That's
and
right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah,
so that's why I pointed at that person with that clue, that kind of thing. There's always some sort of explanation. Well, I thought you meant this.
Yeah.
If you play with more people, you can add in an accomplice and a witness. The witness knows who the murderer is, and the murderer has an alternate win condition with that, and the accomplice is, basically helping them. A lot of these games, the person who's the traitor feels really alone.
Yes.
They feel like, oh, I don't know what everyone's talking about.
Yes.
In Deception, Murder in Hong Kong, everyone has the same information. The murderer sees everyone's cards. They see their own cards. And their job is to deceive everyone and point away from everyone.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means, well, yeah, you're right. I do have the scissors in front of me. But would it really cause that much blood? Like he's saying there was a blood stain on the floor. That seems like an axe. And, Danny has that axe. I think it's Danny. If it's a blood stain, it's got to be something bigger than just scissors.
That's right.
Yeah? And sometimes it's like, yeah, I could be the murderer. So could you. But let's focus on it. You want to deflect as much attention away from yourself.
Without looking like you're deflecting information away from yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the game. That's how it's played.
Yeah.
I love it because every time we play it, it does exactly what you want it to. It creates this tension. It creates a lot of flying accusations around the room and a lot of discussion. And I love that part. The interaction between the players is really high.
Yeah.
Like the game is called Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. And a lot of people shorten that to, do you want to play Murder in Hong Kong? And it's really, the murder is secondary in this game. It's really about the deception.
That's right. Yeah, trying to get away with the murder.
Exactly. And trying to find the murderer. When we shorten it, I try to always shorten it. You want to play deception.
Yes.
Because that's really what the game is. And that's how the game plays. It's about deceiving everyone and providing information about the deception. That's Deception, Murder in Hong Kong.
Sticking to the same part of the world, but a very different game. This game is not a quiet and contemplative, discussing, argumentative game. This game is a boisterous, loud, random dice rolling game.
Yeah, it's a dice chucker.
King of Tokyo. King of Tokyo is a dice-rolling, open-draft, push-your-luck, King of the Hill game for 2 to 6 players, ages 8 and up, that plays in about 30 minutes. King of Tokyo was designed by Richard Garfield and published by Yellow in 2011. Welcome to King of Tokyo, a whimsical cityscape where colossal monsters vie for supremacy. The fires from the Tokyo skyscrapers pierce the sky, creating an apocalyptic urban playground. In this extraordinary place, you'll find Gigazor, Cyber Bunny, and other larger-than-life creatures battling amongst the city's iconic landmarks. The Tokyo Tower is now transformed into a monstrous citadel and serves as throne for the reigning king or queen of the city. Here, giant claws and laser beams replace traffic lights in office buildings as these colossal beings slug it out for control. The streets are paved with energy cubes, and the air crackles with electric excitement as the monsters roar and unleash their devastating power. Victory points and power-ups are scattered like treasures through this captivating landscape, tempting the creatures to climb to the top of the heap. King of Tokyo is an urban playground where strategy, mayhem, and chance converge in an epic battle for dominance. So step into this fantastical city where monsters reign supreme and become the ultimate King of Tokyo. In King of Tokyo, everybody plays one of these kaiju monsters like Godzilla or King Kong, but they're named Gigazor and the King.
Yeah.
And they're sort of off-brand kaiju monsters. And on our turn, we're rolling a handful of dice, and then you would get 2 more re-rolls where you can re-roll any of those dice you want. And trying to get matches in order to get victory points. But there are quite a few different options when you're rolling these dice. You can roll energy cubes, which become this currency which you use to buy variable player power cards. You can roll 1s, 2s, and 3s and try to match those to get victory points. You can roll fists to punch the other players at the table. And you can roll hearts to heal yourself. And the idea is that when you punch somebody, you can then take over and become the King of Tokyo. If you've punched them out of Tokyo, then you're able to go in there and you collect victory points the longer you stay in Tokyo. When you're in Tokyo, all the other players' punches are going to hit you, and all of your punches that you throw are going to hit all the other players. The trick is you can't heal when you're in Tokyo. So all the hearts that you roll when you're in Tokyo cannot be spent to increase your health, and there's a potential you could get kicked out of the game. This is a player elimination game, so if you're not careful, you could be eliminated from the game, which quite often happens.
To me, usually. I love King of Tokyo. I love King of Tokyo so much. It's one of those games, it's like your birthday. What game do you want to play? King of Tokyo!
Nice.
And I'm always the first monster out. And I am not very good at it. And they're not even ganging up on me. It's just like dice rolling games, bad luck, and, pushing my luck a little too far. It's a fun game. I would call this a party game.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's just so loud and rambunctious. It plays up to 6 players.
Yeah, this is a party game.
Definitely works better at a higher player count, I find.
Yeah.
I think 2 and 3 players is a little weak.
Yeah, it is.
But then, once you get up there, it gets a lot more fun, way more rambunctious. Some of these variable player cards could be, and the art on them is quite fun because it all looks like apocalyptic Godzilla movie stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
One's called evacuation orders, and there's a picture of a helicopter, and the expensive card, it costs 7 energy, and when you play this, all the other players lose 5 victory points, which quite devastating.
Yeah.
One of my favorite cards is the extra head.
Yep.
And when you get the extra head, you get to roll an extra die. So all the players are rolling 6 dice and trying to get matches and punches and hearts with these 6 dice. You get the extra head, you get to roll 7 dice. And that can be huge. This plot twist card is pretty cheap. It's only costs 3, and you get to change 1 die to any result. But then you have to discard the card.
Yeah. Some cards are one-time use and some are all game long kind of benefits.
Yeah.
I'm a big, big fan of monster movies. Basically, the old black and white ones,
Yeah.
The giant crabs and the giant ants and the blob. Those kinds of movies were my teens and 20s. I love those movies. I watched them a lot.
Right on.
When King of Tokyo came out, I was just so excited. And those cards, the power-up cards that you can purchase with the energy cubes, really bring in the little bit of theme from those movies. Like you grew an extra head, you had a baby, it learns to fly, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
They almost sound like dialogue from one of those movies. Like, evacuate, everybody evacuate.
Plot twist.
Fire breathing.
Alpha monster.
Eater of the dead.
Even bigger.
Armor plating.
It has a child.
Rapid healing.
Energize.
Smoke cloud. The fact that you're playing the monster and not the civilians who are running away.
Yeah.
It just adds to the fun of this game. The dice that they give you are these, beautiful custom dice, and they're enormous. Like they're like 3 times as big as a normal die.
They're pretty big. Yeah, they're chunky and they're black with the carved out pieces and then painted green, like this bright green. It's embossed.
Embossed, yes.
Yeah.
And when you said this game is a noisier game, it really is, because just throwing this handful of giant dice on the table, it sounds like it should in this kind of game, like a monster. Bam, attack. Right. giant feet hitting the ground and everything kind of shakes a little bit.
Yeah, you're not playing this game when the baby's asleep.
No, it's not really. Yeah, exactly. It is a loud game, and it's made louder when you get that perfect roll, like you're trying to get the numbers to match up, and it's like, yes, I did it. Yeah, it's a great party game. Works really well. The only complaint I have really is that player elimination, because it always happens to me.
Thankfully, the game's not too long. You're not sitting out for very long, and the game goes quicker with less players at the table. And then, those highs and lows are still there. You're just not the ones conducting them.
Yeah. And you can play 2 or 3 games in a night, especially if it's your birthday and you're the only one that really likes this game and you want to play it because every time you play it, you get knocked out fast. And it's like, oh, can we play it again, please? Everyone has to put up with it one more time. I don't know why I love this game so much, and my friends and family are always reluctant to play with me. I think it's just because they don't want to see me happy. I feel like this next game that we're going to talk about, when you're setting it up, it creates this atmosphere with a lot of sound and a lot of chatter and all this background noise, because it's a big game.
Yeah.
It's a game with a lot of parts. You're putting together, the parts of the board, and you're putting down these little gems and the cardboard tokens and all these, cards and different things. And for somebody who's new, it's like, whoa, this is really looking noisy and complicated.
Yeah, it's busy.
Yeah. And if you're explaining the theme as you go along a little bit about what you're doing, that kind of comes through, that sort of general sense of, whoa, this is a busy place to be, and there's a lot going on here, and I'm feeling like a fish out of water a little bit in terms of what to do and how to get it done and how best to do it, because there's a lot to explain. Istanbul. Istanbul is a pick-up and deliver worker placement race game with a modular board for 2 to 5 players, ages 13 and up. It plays in about an hour and was designed by Rudiger Dorn and published by Pegasus Spiel and AEG in 2014. Welcome to the bustling and labyrinthine city of Istanbul, the board game, where the vibrant streets come alive. The board game Istanbul is an intricate puzzle of markets, alleys, and grand bazaars that beckon traders and adventurers from far and wide. As you step into this captivating cityscape, you'll find yourself navigating a mesmerizing web of pathways that wind through the historic district, while the aromatic scents of spices, coffee, and exotic goods fill the air. Istanbul is a place of strategic trade where merchants skillfully wheel and deal with their valuable wares. In this dynamic world, you're not just an observer. You're an ambitious trader striving to build your wealth and establish your reputation. The Grand Bazaar stands at the heart of the city, a bustling hub of commerce and culture. Here, you'll haggle for the finest goods, invest in valuable resources, and outmaneuver your competitors as you aim to become the most successful merchant in Istanbul. Istanbul isn't just a board game. It's an immersive journey into a rich and vibrant city where strategy, resource management, and a touch of luck combine to create an unforgettable experience. Istanbul is a worker placement game, essentially. And the board is made up of cardboard tiles. So there's these, medium-sized tiles that you put next to each other in a 4x4 grid that creates the board. And this is done randomly. And one of the things I love most about the game is, while there's some rules about what tiles can be beside each other or not beside each other and how far apart they have to be, generally, every time you set up this board, it's different.
Yes.
The pathways that you can create are very different. The obstacles that you have to go around to get, the high value worker placement spots are different.
Yeah. Each of these tiles is about the size of a cell phone.
Yeah.
And it's pretty thick, decent cardboard. And they're double-sided as well.
Yeah.
And they have the art depicting the location that they're supposed to be. But then there's also some very handy symbols along the bottom that tells you what that location would do if you go there.
Yeah, and you feel like you're building the market as you're setting it up.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay, all the stalls are out and they're in the right places. And now the sellers start putting their wares on the board.
That's right.
As you put the gems on the different cards and you put the other tiles on top of certain tiles. And it's like, okay, this is where you can turn this in to get money. This is where you can gamble. This is where you can get tea.
Yeah.
And you're explaining what each one does. And like I said, for somebody who's new, it can be a little overwhelming.
It's a lot of talking. Yeah.
Yeah. It takes a lot of patience for someone who's brand new to this game to sit and listen to, me talk about all the things that you can do in this game.
Each tile has a separate action associated with it, and there's so many tiles.
Yeah. And I guess that's true of most worker placement games, right? The more worker placement spots in a worker placement game, the more things you can do in the game, the more fun. But for some reason, this one feels much bigger and, grand, as they call it, the Grand Bazaar.
Yeah.
Because there are a number of different resources in the game, too. Like there are 6 resources that you're collecting in this game.
Right.
Only one of those resources is a win condition. The player who gets to a certain number of rubies first, the game ends and wins the game.
Yeah.
Everything else, generally, you either collect them to turn into money, then turn into rubies, or just to turn directly into rubies, depending on where you are in the game. So you want to collect the rubies to win, but you also want to collect the 5 other resources in the game. Those are fabric, spice, fruit, jewelry, and of course money. Mm-hmm. And there are different locations in Istanbul where you can take your workers to convert your fabric, your spice, and your fruit into money or into a ruby, or to buy a ruby with the money that you sold your fruit from, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there are a number of different locations where you can do different things. Sometimes you just straight up buy a ruby. Sometimes you're selling your wares. Sometimes you are gambling and you are rolling dice. It's at the gambling house and you're trying to roll dice and win something that you can then take and convert it into rubies. You start the game with a wheelbarrow. And the wheelbarrow has each resource that you can collect, and it starts with enough room for 2 of each resource. But you can go to a certain location on the board and purchase an upgrade for your wheelbarrow so that you have enough to hold 3 or 4, or I think it goes up to 5 different of each thing.
Yeah.
There is a location on the board where you can get 1 of each of the resources, except for jewelry. Jewelry you usually have to sell or purchase or gamble to get.
That's right. Trade for them.
Yeah. And there are upgrades to your ability. So like one of the places has these tiles and you can trade in goods to get another assistant token, another worker that you can place on the board. Or it might give you a power that on your turn, you can return one of your workers back to you so that you can use them one more time.
Yeah.
What Istanbul does really uniquely, I think, is this movement mechanism. I really like the way that moves. You start the game with a certain number of assistants, depending on how many players are playing, and your actual character. Your character moves around the board with their assistants and have to leave one assistant behind at the location you end at. And they do all the work for you. You just take the rest of your assistants and move on. What happens on your movement is you can move adjacent to another location, 1 or 2 adjacent locations. So you can move in a straight line, or you can move, in an L shape kind of thing.
Right.
And like I said, you have to leave one of your assistants behind. And as you're doing that, you're getting fewer and fewer workers to do actions with. At some point, you're going to have to decide to backtrack and pick up those assistants so that you can reuse them on a future turn. And you can do that in a number of different ways. Is you can head back to sort of the starting tile, and that recalls all of your workers.
They all sort of teleport back underneath you.
Exactly. But that costs a whole turn. That's all you can do on your turn.
Yeah.
But if you backtrack, so if you plan your turn ahead, that you kind of went one place, did something, one place, did something, one place, did something, and then went back to the previous place, you get to do that action again.
That's right.
Things may have changed in that location in terms of the goods that are available or the rewards that you get.
Sure.
But you get to pick up your assistant rather than leave one behind and do that action again. And if you can retrace those steps, you can sort of work around that you're getting, double usage of this little engine that you're building.
Yeah.
I pick up resources here, I turn them in for money there, and then I turn the money in for a ruby there. And then I go back and I turn in more resources for this, and I get money for that, and then I buy another ruby.
Yeah.
And you can do that 3 or 4 times in the game and pick up a lot of what you're doing.
And so that's really the puzzle of the entire game, is trying to find the most efficient path from one tile to the next in order to turn this into that, in order to get what you need to buy the rubies.
That's a perfect word. This game is all about efficiency because it is a race. We're racing to get the number of rubies that constitutes a win in this game.
Yeah.
You want to collect these rubies in a number of different ways, but you want to do it more efficiently than your competition. And everyone can see, there's these ruby spots on the different spots of the board, and you can see them disappearing. And you look at the bottom of, Sherry's wheelbarrow. She's got 3 rubies already. Oh my God, I've only got 1. What am I going to do? I've got to act faster. I got to go faster.
Yeah.
The other thing that comes in with movement is if you land on a space that has one of your opponents on it, you have to give them this really valuable resource that you've been collecting, which is money. You have to give them $2. Doesn't sound like much, but in Istanbul and in this market, that's a lot of money, and money's hard to come by.
Yeah.
So when you're retracing those steps, trying to do it as efficiently as possible, the worst part is you'll have someone else come in to one of those locations, use the ability there, and now you're stuck. I have to go there because I want to recollect my worker that I left there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, now I'm going to have to pay $2 to my opponent, helping them get a little bit closer to their goals. And meaning now I don't have enough money to do the thing I wanted to do because rubies have all gone up in price and, that kind of thing. So it gets frustrating that way. Adding to that is 2 characters that roam around the board in certain locations. One is the smuggler and one is the governor. And if you land on a location with them, they can give you some sort of reward. They add a bit of randomness to the game, but they also add an incredible amount of replayability. And like I said earlier, this is one of the things that I think Istanbul loves. I find that I love games that have a lot of expansions and tons of replayability.
Yeah.
Istanbul, every time you set it up, the board is randomized and set up differently. Yeah. And these governor and the smuggler, they're moving around the board, and sometimes they're helping your opponents, seems like every turn, and sometimes they're helping you, and you're like, okay, I want to go over there and trade in my goods for money, but the governor's over there.
Yeah.
So I think I'll just stop on the way, say hi to the governor, get the little bonus that he's going to get, and then make my way to trade in my resources for money or whatever I was going to do. And with Istanbul, of course, there's 2 expansions that are out, the Mocha and Bakshish, and the other one is the Letters and Seals. And when you put them together, they give you this option to create the Grand Bazaar, which is a 5x5 grid.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's enormous, and it makes that teach a lot longer, but it really ups the replayability.
The first time I played this game was with all the expansions, the big box Grand Bazaar game.
Right. And
you sold me on it instantly. I wasn't through the first round before I had this thing in my checkout.
That's true, actually. You literally were online at the store buying this game, putting it in your cart, and I think before the game was over, you were like, I just bought Istanbul.
It was my birthday weekend, and I just received a gift certificate, so it was...
That's right.
Promptly spent. Yeah, and I ended up buying the big box version, which has both expansions included in, so I've never not played it complete. My problem with this game, and it's a personal issue, is that there are so many upgrades available to do. You can upgrade your storage of your cart, and you can upgrade when you take a particular action. How powerful is that action going to be? There's a bunch of different upgrades that you can do on that.
Cards that you can collect that give you actions,
Yeah, and so I'm constantly going, well, if I just get all these upgrades and then that upgrade, boom, 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 I'm going to be away to the races, right? And I upgrade too much. I focus too much on that front end. And by the time I really get my engine going, yeah, I'm making some decent bank now.
Yeah.
But not quick enough, and the game ends. And it can be quite frustrating when the game ends suddenly, just as you've gotten everything just the way you like it, and your engine's like nice and humming, and then somebody's like, oh, by the way, I got my last jump. Damn it!
That's so true. That is true of all kinds of engine builders.
All sorts of engine builders.
I want Rutger Dorn to come out with a Istanbul expansion that, the win condition is now you have to collect 15 rubies. It's a 6-hour game.
That's right.
But you're going to have your engine, by the end, it's just going to be humming along. No, I agree. You have to kind of pick your things. What's that saying? You can't see the forest for the trees?
Yeah.
I've just focused on how beautiful the bark is on this tree. It's so wonderful. And everyone else is like, I've got the forest. I've collected everything I need. The game's almost over. What?
Yeah.
Yeah. You've never played without the full game, and I almost always play with the full game now.
Yeah.
But with both expansions, I literally will play this anytime I have the time. It takes a little bit.
Yeah. It makes it feel more epic, obviously, but it does have that sort of, now it's a place, right? Because now it's a 5x5 grid. It's much bigger.
Yep.
And that puzzle of how do we get from here to there and back again is even a little bit more complex.
Yep. This is a game I feel like really should be sold and played with both expansions.
It's a big box.
Yeah, it's a great game. I can't say enough good things about Istanbul. I love this game.
Have you played any of the games that we've talked about today? What's your favorite game named after a place? Drop us a line at escapeintoboardgames@gmail.com. Thanks for listening to the Escape Into Board Games podcast. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Escape Into Board Games. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. It helps more people discover Escape Into Board Games. You can get an Escape Into Board Games t-shirt at geekygoodies.com/escape. Or you can help us fuel the show by buying us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/escape-into-BGS.
This episode is produced by Matt McKenzie and Chris Cormier. Sound editing by Matt McKenzie. Production assistance by Sherry Cormier. Music by John Yasut, Daniel Carlton, and Roman Senyek. See you at the next Escape.